96% of people become more afraid to ask questions the more they're educated. Not because they're less intelligent, but because they've mastered the art of remembering what to believe, what to say, what to never challenge, and they call that thinking. But Elon Musk doesn't think through memory. He thinks by tearing things down, not because he knows more, but because he asks more. The kinds of questions that sound stupid, the ones that make people uncomfortable, the ones that entire systems are designed to avoid. Why are rockets so expensive? That one question turned him into a joke among aerospace experts, but it also birthed SpaceX. Because Elon knows something society doesn't want you to remember, the truth doesn't hide from you. It hides behind the questions you're too afraid to ask. If you've ever felt like you're stuck in a world where obedience is rewarded as intellect and doubt is punished, then this is where you break free. Like this video, subscribe to Mind of Musk, leave a comment about something you once questioned, and share this with someone you don't want to see sleepwalk through life. Because real thinking doesn't begin with agreement. It begins with the question everyone's too scared to ask. No one wants to look stupid. That's instinct. From the moment you're taught to raise your hand in class, you're also taught not to embarrass yourself. You learn to stay quiet if you're unsure. You memorize, you repeat, and eventually you start calling that thinking. But it's not. It's performance. Elon Musk doesn't play that game. He doesn't care if he sounds weird or childish or ignorant. He only cares about one thing: what is true. And if discovering the truth means asking a question that makes him look stupid, then so be it. When Elon asked, "Why are rockets so expensive?" people laughed. Not because it was a dumb question, but because no one in the aerospace world had the courage to ask it seriously. The answer everyone silently accepted was, because that's just how it is. But Elon doesn't accept just how it is. That's not science. That's dogma. And dogma has no place in engineering. Instead, Elon returns to first principles, the foundational truths of physics. What is a rocket made of? What are the raw materials? What do they cost? He broke the problem down, and when the math didn't add up, he didn't assume he was wrong. He assumed the system was broken. That's the difference. Most people don't want to break things. They want to belong. Elon never cared about belonging. He cared about building. And, before he built anything, he dismantled everything, especially assumptions. Rockets are expensive because everyone believes they have to be. So Elon decided they didn't, and then he proved it. Not because he had better answers, but because he dared to ask the question no one else would. That's the core. That's the move. He didn't outsmart them. He just asked what they were too afraid to. You see, the questions we avoid are often the ones that matter most, but we don't ask them. Because we're too educated, too polished, too afraid of looking dumb. But here's the truth. If a question makes you feel exposed, it's probably exposing something real. Elon's gift isn't genius, it's honesty. Brutal, inconvenient honesty. He doesn't pretend to know. He doesn't hide behind expertise. And that's why he sees what others can't. In a world full of scripted answers, the person asking a stupid question might be the only one still thinking. So if you feel stuck, if your mind is clouded with elegant explanations that never fully click, try asking the question you've been taught to avoid. Try being wrong. Try being laughed at. Try being free. Elon didn't beat aerospace because he was smarter. He just refused to stay silent. You don't need to be a genius to find the truth. You just need to be honest enough to ask. And if that honesty makes you sound dumb, then dumb is the price of seeing clearly. It's not that you don't know how to question. It's that you've been programmed not to. From the moment you were a child, you weren't taught how to think. You were taught how to be right. When a child asks too many questions, adults tell them to stop. When you doubt, people say you're being difficult. When you challenge, You're told you're disruptive. So you learn something early. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't ask things that make others unsure. Don't touch what's hidden beneath collective belief. Over time, you become a polite version of yourself, obedient, likable, and completely incapable of interrogating reality. Society doesn't explicitly forbid questions. It just punishes you every time you ask. That's how programming works. Not through force, but through incentives. Not by violence, but by isolation. Elon Musk learned this the hard way. As a kid, he wasn't praised for his curiosity. He was bullied for being different. He once said, "I was bullied almost every day. I had to learn how to survive by hiding." But he didn't stop thinking. He didn't trade thought for belonging. And that's why Elon saw something most adults never do. Society rewards compliance. Not truth, not clarity, not thinking. Just the ability to repeat what's already been approved. When you score well in school, you get praised. But you score well because you answer the questions they give you. You're not rewarded for asking better ones. You're rewarded for not disturbing the structure. And then, you think you're intelligent, but you're not. You're precise. You're well-trained. You're a machine that performs on command. And that's exactly what society wants. People who are silent, who obey, who only frame truth inside what is socially acceptable. Elon rejected that. When he built PayPal, people said he was insane for trying to disrupt banking without a finance background. When he launched Tesla, they called him a fool for believing electric cars could be fast and desirable. But Elon didn't care, because he understood something about the system. Most people don't actually think. They mimic. They defend what feels familiar. That's why they resist anyone who questions the system, not because the question is wrong, but because if it's right, their whole life has been a lie. Elon isn't afraid of that. He once said, "If you're too scared of being wrong, you'll never think differently." And that fear, it's installed by society. You fear your teacher's disapproval, your boss's judgment, your peers' ridicule. So you stay quiet. You choose the comfort of not asking, but the price you pay isn't lost opportunity, it's lost truth. You lose the ability to see what's real, because all you know how to do is react to what you've been programmed to accept. You become efficient, but you're no longer yourself. When Elon approaches any industry, he doesn't start by learning the norms. He starts by tearing them apart from the root, from the laws of physics, not from tradition, but from truth. Because he knows every industry has its own internal religion, things everyone knows are true, but no one can explain why. And only by asking what sounds stupid can you reach the depth of that programming. Not to rebel, but to see clearly. Elon doesn't think he's special. He just refuses to hide his questions, while everyone else buries them under politeness. You don't need a high IQ to think like Elon. You just need to pause and ask something simple. Do I believe this because it's true, or because everyone else agreed to repeat it? If you can't answer that, you might be stuck in a loop you don't know exists. You're not dumb. You've just been trained not to look. And that is the silent enemy. If you don't recognize it, it will define the rest of your life. Most people are living inside a script they didn't write. They wake up, follow the plan, chase credentials, mimic opinions, and call it life. They believe what sounds intelligent. They repeat what gets applause, but they don't question where the script came from. That's the illusion, the belief that you're thinking for yourself when you're just rehearsing the lines society gave you. Elon Musk never accepted the script. He burned it. Because the script doesn't lead to truth. It leads to comfort. It rewards safety. It punishes friction. That's why Elon constantly asks questions that sound stupid. Not to be provocative, but to test if anything real exists underneath the assumptions. When he asked, "Why can't electric cars be fast and beautiful?" the auto industry laughed. Electric cars were supposed to be small, boring, and utilitarian. But that belief wasn't rooted in physics. It was rooted in a story, one that had never been challenged because no one had anything to gain by challenging it. So Elon did. And in doing so, he revealed the truth hiding behind the illusion. Electric cars weren't limited by engineering. They were limited by imagination, by blind repetition, by scripts. The same happened in aerospace. Everyone knew rockets had to be single-use. But why? Because that's how it's always been. That answer was enough. For everyone except Elon. He saw that answer for what it was. A placeholder. A defense mechanism to protect the comfort of collective belief. So he asked the obvious. What if we could land the rocket? Not in theory, in practice, on real Earth, with real steel. People said it was impossible, and then they laughed. And then they watched it happen. That's the cycle. Elon asks what no one else dares. First they laugh, then they deny, then they copy. Because the script only works as long as no one sees it. Once someone steps off the stage and says, "Hey, this isn't real," the entire illusion cracks. Elon once said, "You get paid in proportion to the difficulty of the problems you solve." But you can't solve difficult problems if you're not even allowed to question the easy ones. The world is full of systems built on assumptions no one has interrogated. And that's why it stays broken. Because real change doesn't come from rebellion. It comes from inquiry. Quiet, persistent inquiry. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that forces truth to come out of hiding. Elon doesn't destroy industries. He just stops pretending. And the industries collapse on their own because they were never real to begin with. Just scaffolding held up by consensus, by inertia, by fear. The illusion is maintained by people who are afraid of being alone in their thinking. But Elon lives in that space. He's used to it. He once said, "Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster." And for him, the alternative to asking was worse than failure. It was stagnation, obedience, decay. That's why he keeps asking. Not to get attention, but to escape the trap. Most people never leave the script. They're too scared of what happens if they do. Who will they be without it? What if they're wrong? What if no one follows? But the people who build the future are never the ones who followed the plan. They're the ones who burned it and dared to write a new one. You've waited before. For the right time. The right mood. The perfect moment to feel ready. You told yourself you weren't avoiding, just preparing, just gathering momentum. But that momentum never came. And deep down, you already knew why. Waiting isn't a neutral act. It's a decision, a silent surrender, a quiet agreement to let the world move on without you. Elon Musk doesn't wait, not because he's impulsive, but because he understands the physics of inertia, not just in rockets, but in life. Objects in motion stay in motion, and objects at rest, they decay. Ideas decay. Momentum decays. Resolve decays. The longer you wait, the more you rot. Elon doesn't take action because he feels confident. He takes action because he knows confidence is irrelevant. What matters is movement. What matters is iteration. Most people imagine there's a perfect version of themselves waiting to be activated. And that one day, after enough research, enough thinking, enough hesitation, they'll be ready. But readiness is a lie. It's a socially acceptable disguise for fear. And fear, Elon understands, is not something you eliminate. It's something you move through. I think it's possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary, he once said. Not to wait to become extraordinary, but to choose it. Now, while everyone else is frozen in mental rehearsal, Elon builds. He launches. he iterates. While others are reading books on risk, he risks. While they seek motivation, he engineers systems because he knows motivation is unreliable. But momentum is physics. The cost of waiting isn't just lost time, it's lost identity. You become someone else, someone you didn't choose, someone shaped by what you didn't do. And that version of you, it doesn't just hurt your progress, it becomes your character. Elon isn't fearless. He just doesn't negotiate with hesitation. When he sees something broken, he moves. Not when it's convenient, not when the world approves. But as soon as the question appears, the doubt, the opportunity, he acts. And if he fails, he moves again. Because failure doesn't kill momentum. Waiting does. The most dangerous part of hesitation is that it looks smart. It's rewarded by culture. It makes you seem cautious, thoughtful, responsible. But inside, you're decaying. You're quietly abandoning the version of yourself you'll never get back. Elon's urgency doesn't come from impatience. It comes from clarity. From knowing that life doesn't pause when you do. That time doesn't care how scared you are. That most dreams don't die from failure. They die from the endless rehearsal of an action never taken. You don't have to be fast. You don't have to be brilliant. You just have to move. Elon understands that speed is leverage, not for its own sake, but to collapse the distance between thought and execution. He once said, "If something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." That's not inspiration. That's physics. That's engineering your own momentum before life erodes it. Because if you don't launch, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you don't adapt. And if you don't adapt, you fall behind. Quietly, invisibly, permanently. Elon doesn't wait because he's brave. He acts because he knows what waiting costs. Not just money, not just time, but the slow, silent erosion of everything you could have been. A stupid question isn't stupid. It's a scalpel, a lever, a bomb. It doesn't sound sophisticated. It doesn't win debates. It doesn't impress professors. But it does something far more dangerous. It breaks the spell. Elon Musk doesn't ask questions to look smart. He asks them to destroy illusions, and the ones that work best. They almost always sound dumb. That's the point. Because anything that's real, fundamentally real, should survive a dumb question. If it can't, it's fragile. It's a facade. And Elon doesn't build on facades. He builds on physics. When he asks, "Why is this done this way?" he's not being difficult. He's diagnosing the software of the system. Because every industry, every institution, runs on unspoken assumptions. Lines of code installed by history, habit, ego. A stupid question is a debugger. It doesn't respect tradition. It doesn't care who's in the room. It only wants to know, is this real? And the way Elon constructs that question isn't random. There's an anatomy to it. First, he strips emotion. He's not asking to provoke. He's not asking to win. He's asking to see. Second, he removes assumptions. Instead of asking, "Why is this hard?" he asks, "What makes this hard?" That small shift breaks the frame. Now he's not challenging you. He's challenging the physics. Third, he reverts to first principles. What are the raw materials? What are the costs? What are the constraints imposed by nature, not by people? And if the obstacle doesn't come from nature, it comes from culture, from fear, from momentum. And that means it can be changed. Elon's real question is never about the surface. It's about the root. When he asked, "Why can't we land a rocket?" the industry heard a challenge. But Elon wasn't challenging them. He was challenging gravity, fuel, structure, math. He wasn't asking for permission. He was asking if reality itself allowed for another outcome. And when it did, the experts looked foolish. Not because they were dumb, but because they stopped asking. The longer something is accepted, the dumber it sounds to question it. That's how you know the illusion is strong. But Elon doesn't care how it sounds. He cares if it holds. The stupid question is powerful because it's honest. It doesn't posture. It doesn't seek applause. It's the kind of question a child would ask, because children haven't been trained to perform intelligence. They ask to know. Elon kept that. He never replaced it with adult pretense. He doesn't fear being wrong. He fears pretending to be right. That's the difference. Most people use questions to signal brilliance. Elon uses questions to expose architecture, to see what's underneath the system, to ask, is this necessary or just inherited? Is this reality or just agreement? A stupid question is dangerous not because it's wrong, but because it's clear. Too clear. It removes the fog that protects the lie. Elon uses it to force clarity. He doesn't argue with fog. He cuts through it. That's why people resist it, because once a stupid question gets in, it's hard to unsee what it reveals. Elon doesn't want to be right. He wants to see clearly. And that begins with a question so simple it embarrasses the people who built their lives avoiding it. There's a point in life where asking becomes dangerous. Not because the question is harmful, but because the answers might destroy everything you've built. Your reputation, your identity, your belonging. That's the real reason people stop asking. Not ignorance. Fear. Elon Musk knows that fear. He's lived it. Every time he questioned a system, education, aerospace, energy, finance, he wasn't just asking about products. He was threatening belief systems, cultural scaffolding, the mental frameworks billions rely on to feel safe. And when you do that, people don't just disagree. They defend. They attack. Because your question isn't just inconvenient, it's destabilizing. Elon asks anyway, not recklessly, not for attention, but because he understands the cost of not asking is worse. If you don't ask, you live someone else's version of the world. You inherit scripts. You follow maps drawn by people who were afraid. And then, you call that truth. But truth doesn't survive in silence. It needs friction. It needs exposure. It needs someone willing to risk their comfort, their image, their safety, for clarity. Elon never asks because he's certain. He asks because he's uncertain. Because something doesn't add up. Because consensus feels suspicious. And that tension, the gap between what everyone accepts and what reality shows, that's where he inserts the question, even when the cost is everything. When he questioned the need for car dealerships, for government-controlled spaceflight, for fossil-fueled transportation, he wasn't just disrupting business. He was putting his name, his wealth, his credibility on the line. People mocked him. Experts wrote him off. Investors fled. But he kept asking. And that's the thing about real questions. They cost you. They don't come with applause. They come with silence, with discomfort, with risk. But they also come with truth. And for Elon, that's worth it. He once said, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." That applies to action. But it starts with the question. If you're not willing to ask, you're not ready to see. Because what you see might not flatter you. It might not reward you. It might dismantle the life you thought you were building. But that's the price of reality. Elon doesn't chase comfort. He chases clarity. And clarity demands sacrifice. Most people wait for permission, for timing, for proof that it's safe to challenge the obvious. Elon skips all that. He steps directly into the tension, into the blind spot. And he asks, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. He understands that silence is not peace, it's stagnation. That agreement is not wisdom. It's often fear in disguise. And that truth, if it's ever going to surface, needs someone to risk everything to drag it out. Elon is that someone, not because he's a rebel, but because he refuses to lie, to pretend the emperor has clothes, to nod along with ideas that feel hollow. He doesn't trust legacy, He trusts logic, and logic demands the question. Always. Even when it burns your bridges, even when it isolates you, even when it turns your name into a punchline, Elon asks. And in doing so, he exposes the rest of us. Because if one man can ask and change everything, what's our excuse for staying quiet? You don't need to be Elon Musk to change the world. You just need a question, one that sounds too simple, one you thought you weren't allowed to ask. But that one question could show you something you've never seen before. Elon isn't a genius. He just never stopped asking. While the world stayed silent in fear of being wrong, he was willing to be laughed at for the sake of truth. And if this journey stirred something in you, don't suppress it. Hold on to it. Start with the question you've buried for too long. And if you want to keep digging, keep thinking differently, keep seeing through the illusions, then this space is for you. Like this video, subscribe to Mind of Musk, leave a comment with the one question you can't ignore, and share this with someone you know is finally ready to doubt what they were told. Because asking a question might not make you a genius, but it might make you the only one still truly alive.